Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and on this episode of King of the Hill, I want to talk about the Great Wyrm of the Dragons. The Great Wyrm has the ongoing ability, other players here are awarded one less VP from this base when it scores. This is strictly from the printed base award, not from any VP awarded by abilities such as Rhodes Plaza Mall or Garrison. Normally I'm not a fan of situations where any minion, particularly the King minion, exactly mimics an action, particularly a double feature, which is the case with runes. But I like it for Great Wyrm because the loss of VP really highlights the area control nature of the dragons. One of the problems with punitive area control factions is that they often lack enough cards that can provide disincentives. This is the case with tricksters. But with dragons, Great Wyrm sends out a loud, clear statement. If you want to score points on this base, you are going to have to settle for less or find a way around it. And by forcing players to find a way around it, we can create a lot of opportunities for area control and influence the moves of your opponents. There are a lot of playbook options for the Great Wyrm, all designed with the same goal, reducing your opponent's VP. Yet there are a lot of subtleties with this card that differ based on the use case, and that's what I want to talk about today. But before I get to them, I want to bring up something that a loyal viewer brought up in a Madness video. I'm not a fan of Madness, and this viewer pointed out that the dragons deny VP just like Madness does. It's an interesting point, but I think there is a fundamental difference between Madness loss of VP and others. First, the dragon VP loss affects everyone equally, and yet it also affects no one. You don't have to compete on a dragon base, you are making the choice to do so. For the most part, with one exception which I'll get to later. Madness doesn't always affect everyone equally, even cards like Insanity, because players can dispose of it at different rates. When Madness gets shuffled in, it becomes the luck of the draw as to which players can remove it. It clogs your hand, forcing you to discard other cards, and still benefits some factions by letting them have it in hand. Madness is also much more spammable than the dragons are, although I will say that my friends played a game where a player lost 5 points due to runes, and I was worried he'd quit the game forever. I acknowledge the potential for spamming, but it's harder. Most importantly, there is a fundamental difference between denying a VP and subtracting a VP from the final score. I deny people VP all the time, usually by kicking them off a base. In fact, I deny them several VP per base if I can. But if I'm winning, and I'm denied a VP, that could keep the game going longer and give me a chance to come out on top. But Madness subtracts from the final score without actually delaying the game, which can create a Madness tie situation. And I actually just did this to someone, winning a game knowing that I would lose points for Madness but still come out on top. If I had subtracted those VPs and the game were forced to continue, I would have lost, no question. While that may make the Dragon VP look worse, instead I find that it helps the Dragons player because it gives them more time by preventing people from advancing the end of the game. It's a matter of perspective as to which is better or worse, but they are fundamentally different. Now, using the context of denying a VP, which is again optional, there are many ways to use Great Wyrm. The simplest way is to simply just cost everyone a victory point. This effect will occur regardless of position, the winners will get less, making runner-up more desirable, and the runner-up position seems punitive. Third place could potentially become irrelevant, which has its own effect. I really like Great Wyrm on 4-3-2 bases because it forces player to really compete for victory in order to keep pace and prevent you from taking a lead in score. If they win, we'd both get 3 points potentially, and losing creates a 2-point deficit. The effect is more extreme on a 4-2-1 base, but if I were in that situation, I'd be more inclined to give up on that base and settle for 1 point, because there's too much risk for overcommitment. What I'm trying to do is force someone to either overcommit severely or reduce my own commitment if I win out in the end, which the Dragon Specials really help with. The next type of Great Wyrm play is really, really brutal, and it involves Bring Down the Walls. Great Wyrm is a great minion target for this. Not only is it the upper boundary of power that you can add at the last minute, but it's a surprise loss of VP, one that players cannot avoid. I mentioned that players often make a choice to compete on an undesirable base, but here they don't have a choice. When Great Wyrm is used on a 4-2-1 base in this matter, a player can go from being up 2 points to being down 3 with a single minion and that's incredibly powerful. This is a very telegraphed move, but outside of action destruction, there's not a lot you can do about it. Even if you don't win a base, imagine a player going big expecting to end the game using everything they've got, only to find out that they are 1 point short. This is a card that players have to know is in the game, otherwise the revelation will be jarring. Another Great Wyrm play is to combine with runes to completely ruin any chance of a player playing there. I mentioned before that you want to entice players to spend resources or avoid the base entirely, and if a base scores nothing for the player, I don't see the point in playing there. Imagine playing Great Wyrm and runes on a 3-1-1 or 3-2-1 base. Would a player really want to spend a winning amount of power just to receive 1 VP, where I do very little and get the same amount? What this does is allow you to mark off a base for yourself, allowing steady build-up. Then you can use Burn It Down to replace the base with the base from the discard pile that offers more VP, scoring it that turn. Here you are using the Great Wyrm as an avoidance mechanism that allows you stress-free presence on a base. If you have phase 3 movement, this is a great play as you really don't need power there, particularly if you can move the Great Wyrm to another base where he could eventually deny VP. This is also a fantastic terraforming play, swapping it out for a variable style reward like the factory base or Rhodes Plaza Mall. Finally, you can go wide with your Great Wyrm and runes, making every base undesirable. This works well in 2-player where you can guarantee a loss of VP, but I'm not a fan of this approach unless there is a significant penalty for playing on the one base that is exempt. This could be a ninja base or Wyrm's Desolation, or it can be worsened by cards like Dangerous Grounds or Pay the Piper. If you can combine a second area control faction, offering a player a choice between losing a VP and bleeding cards can be nerve-wracking. No one wants to lose VP, and it's enough of a distraction to trick someone into bleeding cards, even though that may result in several more lost VP because they won't be able to compete. The great thing about area control factions is that the threat of their effect can be just as powerful as the effect itself. Positioning with the Great Wyrm is very important. There are times to go wide and time to go deep with punishment. There are benefits to playing it early and extreme emotional reactions when it is played late. Who knew that one simple sentence could cause so much disruption? What do you think of the Great Wyrm, and how do you usually use it? Let me know in the comments. That's it for this week. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Let's shut it down.